Meet Luke and Vader. Luke is empathetic, patient, caring, always trying to do the right thing. And Vader, well, Vader is our victim manipulator today. Caution. The video is exposing and rough in places. Here, I present the naked truth about victim mentality manipulators. I break down who they are, how they operate, why you may keep them in your life even when you know something's wrong, and most importantly, how you stop the manipulations from eating you alive. If someone has ever called you manipulative and you weren't sure whether to believe them, this video might help. And if someone has broken down every day you try to set a boundary, this video will definitely help, because those two experiences are more connected than you may think. Just to be clear, this isn't show info from the internet. I went through this firsthand in my family and I witnessed my friend going through this with her partner. I won't delve into details of the cases from my life, but I'll show you the pattern that unites them. The pattern you'll be able to recognize if a victim manipulator is in your life now or ever will be. Let's delve into how not to become a victim of someone who chose victimhood as a lifestyle. Firstly, being a victim is not the same as having a victim mentality. Being a victim means something traumatic happened to you. Victim mentality is what happens when someone takes that experience or just the idea of suffering and turns it into an identity. It becomes the lens through which one sees every relationship and every conflict. They are always the one being wronged, always the one who has it harder, always the one who deserves special treatment. And it works, not in the sense that it makes their life better, but that it produces what psychologists call secondary gains, the hidden benefits a person gets from maintaining a problem. As with victim mentality, the secondary gains are enormous. I was telling you about my worries, you didn't answer anything and just changed the subject to your problems. Were you even listening to me? I'm barely holding it together and you're doing this to me right now. You're so selfish. You think only about yourself and don't acknowledge that I'm also human and can feel pain. I'll keep everything to myself from now on. They get compassion. They get attention. They avoid accountability because everything always happens to them and nothing is ever their fault. Victim mentality is an extreme example of an external locus of control. A person with such a mentality tends to believe that their life is greatly or entirely influenced by the external circumstances rather than their own choices and actions. And that avoidance, that refusal to take responsibility, becomes the organizing principle of how they behave in relationships that they don't want to lose. But here's where it gets darker. Some people don't just carry this mentality passively. Some people, whether they realize it or not, learn to use it. And that's when victim mentality stops being just a mindset and becomes a style of manipulation. It becomes, in fact, the only way they know how to get what they want. The only way they know how to be loved. There is a concept in psychology called learned helplessness. The basic idea is that when a person or an animal is repeatedly exposed to situations when their actions don't change the outcome, they eventually stop trying. Even when the situation changes and they could act and make a genuine difference, they don't. They have learned to be helpless. While learned helplessness is an involuntary result of trauma, the victim manipulator takes the posture of helplessness and weaponizes it. I can't help it, this is just who I am, and by claiming that my actions hurt you, you're telling me that I can't be myself. Their display of helplessness is exactly what aims to get them out of accountability. It's an endless cycle. If you can't do anything about your behavior, nobody can ask you to change, and everybody must accept you just as you are, because you can't change the way you are anyway. And that's the real tragedy of it, because a person who refuses to recognize their own capacity to act, to think, to choose, to change is a person who has abandoned the one tool that makes living and thriving possible: their own mind. Before we proceed, there is a critical thing I want you to keep in mind throughout the rest of the video. The person being manipulated is not hurting the victim manipulator. They are not being cruel, they are not attacking. Most of the time, they are doing everything they can to comfort them, to reassure them, to make them feel safe and loved. But it's never enough. And it can never be enough. Because what's hurting the victim manipulator isn't you, it's themselves. It's their own refusal to see that joyful, reliable relationships are built on mutual value and respect, not on endless attempts to change another person or force them into compliance. What's hurting them is that deep down, they don't like who they are. They don't believe they can be genuinely liked by anyone, and that fear of being abandoned is so overwhelming that no amount of reassurance can ever quiet it. But more on this later. Now we can proceed. Let's briefly define manipulation. Manipulation is coercing someone to act against their interests through emotional pressure. Emotions matter. But your feelings, and especially their feelings, are not proof that something is ultimately true or wrong. The victim manipulator's entire strategy depends on one confusion: treating their emotional reaction as proof that you are wrong. They cry, so you must have been cruel. They are hurt, so what you said must have been unfair. They collapse, so you must have pushed them too hard. But none of that follows. Someone can be genuinely upset and still be the one who caused the problem. A manipulator's tears or collapse are not proof that the other person is actually cruel or wrong. When you start letting someone else's emotional display override what you can see with your own eyes and conclude with your own mind, that's when you've lost. Because you've let an emotional reaction, theirs, replace your rational judgment, and that's one of the most dangerous substitutions a person can make. The victim manipulator builds their entire relationship style around this approach. The approach I'm talking about, the manipulation through weakness, pain, emotional collapse, maps very closely to what psychologists call vulnerable narcissism, or sometimes covert narcissism. Some people, when they hear narcissist, may picture someone loud, arrogant, controlling, and that's the overt type. The vulnerable or covert narcissist manipulates through fragility. Nobody has ever made me feel this horrible. After everything I've done for you, I can breathe. I literally can't breathe right now because of what you just said to me. Is that what you wanted? Are you happy now? The mechanism is different. Tears instead of aggression. But the result is identical. You stop trusting what you saw, what you felt, and what you were about to say because their pain is the sole argument that makes all of it seem irrelevant. The pattern I'm going to describe often appears in codependent relationships, one-sided friendships, or any case when someone fears abandonment and hasn't developed healthy ways to add value to others' lives. If you've been through this, you'll recognize it immediately. Psychologist Jennifer Freyd created the acronym DARVO to describe this pattern. It stands for deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. Step 1. Someone hurts you, not by accident, but through a deliberate pattern of choices. You confront them about something they did. You say calmly, clearly, I told you several times how your constant undermining and belittling of everything I like makes me upset. Why do you keep doing it? And they deny it. I never said that. That's not what happened. Or I didn't mean that. Do not misinterpret my words. Step 2. They attack you for bringing it up. Instead of addressing what they did, they collapse. Anyway, I can express myself whenever and however I want. Or do you want me to just shut up and pretend everything is fine? And step 3, they reverse the roles. You know what? Forget it. I can never say anything around you without being attacked for it. Or it's maybe even something crazy like, I can never do anything right and my whole life is a mistake. Is that what you want to say? Suddenly, they are the ones suffering. Suddenly, you are the one who needs to apologize for having a valid reaction to their behavior. They become a victim, and you are the one who did something wrong by speaking up. If you've lived through this, you know exactly how disorienting, destabilizing, and gut-wrenching it is. That feels like hell, to be honest. You walk into a conversation knowing how they hurt you, and you walk out apologizing. That's Darva. And the victim manipulator runs this cycle on repeat. And just like that, your rational boundaries become their injury. Your honesty becomes their trauma. And now, somehow, you're comforting the person who hurts you because you feel pity for them. And that's a natural thing. When you see someone you care about in pain, you want to help them. But playing by these rules helps nobody. It keeps them trapped in their evasion and keeps you trapped in an unearned guilt. That's the trade of this kind. Every single time they give you guilt, you give them control. See, in healthy relationships, people exchange value. Honesty for honesty, respect for respect, accountability for accountability. In a productive and joyful relationship, people create value in each other's lives through mutual effort. The victim manipulators don't do that. They extract value without returning something valuable. They take your empathy and convert it into compliance. They take your compassion and weaponize it against you. They take your virtues, your honesty, your sense of fairness, your desire to be a good person, and they use those exact qualities as levers against you. And I'll tell you from my experience, I repeatedly heard exclamations such as, "You're a monster, a soulless monster. How can you intentionally cause me such pain?" While trying my best to comfort the person and still hold my boundaries. Though I was showing them a huge amount of empathy, it was never enough. The better a person you are, the more they can take from you. The more empathy you show, the more they will want from you. And they never have to change. That's the whole point. They play a victim so that they never have to look at their own behavior. Because the moment they admit that they hurt you, they have to admit that things aren't just happening to them, that they are making choices, and those choices have consequences. And this is where I want to be really direct. This isn't just a bad habit. This is evasion. It's a choice. As time passes, it may stop being a fully conscious one, but it's a choice. To avoid seeing what they don't want to see. They are choosing to avoid seeing themselves clearly because what they see is someone who hurts people. And that's too much to bear. And that evasion over months and years becomes a fundamental part of who they are. And here's what sits underneath all of it. The thing they'll never say out loud and may not even consciously admit to themselves. On some level, the victim manipulators don't believe they have anything of real value to bring to the relationship. They can't offer you honesty, because that would mean facing themselves. They can't offer you accountability, because that would mean admitting fault. They can't offer you growth, because that would mean they are not perfect just the way they are and they'd actually have to change. So what's left? Their pain and your attachment. That becomes the only thing they have to offer. And if pain is the only currency that keeps them from losing you, then of course they'll push it to the maximum. The harsh truth is that pity-seeking behavior that keeps people close in the short term pushes them away in the long term. It leads to the very abandonment the victim manipulator is terrified of. And look, one of the hardest parts to accept is that a lot of them stop noticing that they are doing it. It becomes reflexive. It becomes their lifestyle, their default mode, the only template they have for receiving care. They genuinely believe that who they really are, or to be more specific, who they've made themselves into, do not deserve sincere, honest love. But the fact that they don't see it doesn't mean that you have to drown with them. If you recognize everything I've described so far, the collapse, the guilt, the Darva cycle, and you're still trying to please the family member or your friend or romantic partner, anyone, you're probably asking yourself, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just leave? Nothing is wrong with you. And there are real psychological reasons why this happens. The first one is intermittent reinforcement. This is one of the most powerful conditioning mechanisms that take place here. Here's how it works. If someone treats you badly 100% of the time, you leave. That's easy. But if they treat you badly 70% of the time and then unpredictably are warm, loving, present, the person you fell for, your brain locks onto those good moments. It starts chasing them. After days of cold silence, they may suddenly buy you a gift or just approach you and say something like, I'm so lucky to have you, you know, you're my whole world, right? And you start thinking, see, this is who they really are. The other stuff is just because they're going through a hard time that never ends for some reason. But anyway, by the way, this is the exact same mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. The unpredictability of the reward is what keeps you pulling the lever. In relationships, this is exactly what psychologists call a trauma bond. An emotional attachment that strengthens, not weakens, by the cycle of pain and relief. The worse the pain, the more intense the relief feels. And the more intense the relief, the harder it is to walk away. Because leaving means giving up hope that their good self will come back permanently. The second reason you stay is that the victim manipulator is exploiting your best qualities. Not your worst, your best. Your empathy, your fairness, your desire to be a good person. They are not targeting people who don't care. They are targeting people who care deeply. Because those are the people who are likely to override their own needs to help someone who seems to be in pain. And this is the cruelest part of the whole dynamic. You stay because you are a good person. You keep trying because you are capable of empathy. The very traits that make you someone worth being around are the exact traits being weaponized against you. And the third reason you stay is described by a model from psychology called the Karpman drama triangle. It describes three roles that people rotate through in dysfunctional relationships: the victim, the persecutor, and the rescuer. In healthy relationship or conflict, none of these roles exists. Too mature people just talk. But in a manipulative dynamic, the moment you set a boundary, the victim manipulator casts you as the persecutor, the one attacking them, and themselves as the victim. And what do decent people do when they see someone they care about being hurt? They rescue. You're the person I'm closest to on the planet. I thought you, of all people, would understand. So you flip into the rescuer role. And over time, that role can easily become part of how you see yourself in the relationship. You're the stable one. You're the strong one. You're the one who holds it all together. And if you stop rescuing, if you set a boundary and hold it, you start to feel like a bad person. Like something is wrong with you for not helping. And on top of that, you're stepping into unfamiliar territory. Letting go of a role that felt like part of who you are. Neither of those is easy. Here's the question that ties all of this together. Why does this work at all? Why do smart, capable people fall for it again and again? Because it targets the deepest thing you have, your relationship with your own mind, your self-esteem. Self-esteem has two components. The first is self-efficacy. The confidence that your mind is capable of understanding and dealing with the reality. That you can observe, evaluate, come to a conclusion, and act on what you see to your advantage. The second is self-worth. The conviction that you deserve to be happy, that your needs are legitimate, that your life matters. The victim manipulator attacks both at the same time. When they accuse you of speaking up, they are telling you two things. One, your perception is wrong. You're being cruel, not fair or accurate. And two, your discomfort doesn't matter. Mine is bigger. Mine comes first. Always. And every time you comply, every time you say, yes, it's probably just me, every time you apologize for having a reasonable reaction to manipulations, you're training yourself to distrust your own mind. And here's the vicious cycle. The lower your self-esteem drops, the easier you are to manipulate next time. Because you're already halfway to surrendering your judgments before the conversation even starts. The victim manipulator just finished the job. This is identical to how gaslighting works. The gaslighter doesn't just argue with your conclusion, they argue with your right to have one. You're too sensitive, you're overreacting, that never happens, you're delusional. They are trying to replace what you see with what they need you to believe, and they do it by repeatedly undermining your confidence in your own mind. The victim manipulator does the exact same thing, just with tears instead of aggression. One says you're crazy, the other says you're cruel. But both have the same goal: make you stop trusting yourself. So how do you break this cycle? First, and this is probably the hardest part, you stop confusing their pain with your responsibility. You're responsible for treating people honestly and fairly. You are not responsible for someone's refusal to face reality. Second, you start treating your own perception and conclusions as evidence, not as proof that you're the cruel one, not as drama, as real data. You look at the actual pattern of what they do and trust your mind. Remember that their emotional reaction is not proof that your perception is wrong. Feeling bad and being right are two completely different things. Third, you hold your ground. And there is a statement that will tell you everything you need to know about the person you are dealing with. I understand you are hurting. I'm not dismissing that. But it doesn't erase you mistreating me, and I'm not going to pretend it does. A person who can hear that and stay in the conversation is someone worth working with. A person who escalates, grumbles, or punishes you for even saying it, that's someone showing you exactly how every future conversation will go. And fourth, you recognize the drama triangle for what it is, and you refuse to play your part. When they collapse and cast you as the persecutor, you don't take the bait. You don't rescue. You don't attack. You stay exactly where you are and say what's true. That's the only position that breaks the cycle, the one that isn't on the triangle at all. This way, you stop rescuing people who use their wounds as weapons. Because compassion is not self-sacrifice. Caring about someone does not mean abandoning your own judgment every time they feel uncomfortable. A relationship in which your honesty is treated as an attack is not a relationship you can survive with your self-respect intact. Every single one of the steps comes down to the same thing: taking your own mind seriously, even when someone you're attached to tells you not to. That's how you rebuild your self-respect and self-esteem after such interactions. It's not cruelty, it's choosing yourself. Nobody can give this to you. No amount of external validation replaces self-respect. It earns through the repeated act of being honest with yourself, facing reality instead of avoiding it, and refusing to suppress your understanding of what's happening to you. The higher your self-esteem, the harder you are to manipulate. The victim manipulator is one of the most eloquent examples of what evading the truth about yourself and reality leads to. They run from who they are, and in doing so, they destroy the very relationships they are terrified of losing. Some people don't want to be saved, and that's their right. They've chosen a way of existing that gives them spurious comfort that'll stop working someday. You can feel compassion for that. But you don't have to pay for it, to pay the price of your own mind to keep a relationship that requires you to stay small. While writing this script, I also realized that I should record a video about how to recognize the victim mentality in yourself, get rid of it, and benefit from getting rid of it. So that will be the topic of my next video. Have you ever held your ground with someone who tried to make you feel guilty for being honest? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. If this video speaks to you, like and subscribe. Through my videos, I explore how people can overcome their limiting beliefs, develop genuine self-esteem, and become their own solid ground. I'm Daria, and see you soon!